We're sinking, Evan. Still.
I chose Arrival for many reasons, but one of the main reasons why I chose Arrival is because I was a new parent. I had to ugly ask myself if I was presented a challenging idea or a challenging question about the mortality of my children, how would I respond? The way I tried to approach the relationship between Louise and Hannah was that I took all the other stupid layers all the baggage we bring to the program as human beings, gender, race, all those things. I try to take those things, then I shouldn't say stupid, but I try to take all those things that are like, I want to live in those things and transfer those things into my relationship with those characters. When I was shooting Hannah, I was ultimately shooting my son. When I was shooting Amy Adams, contemplating the mortality of her child, I was shooting my wife. I was shooting another loved one who may be faced with the same sort of challenges. And so my approach, again, it kind of goes back to one of your earlier questions, is like to find myself in the story, to find myself inside the story as the cameraman, or find my career, or find some horizontal, vertical move. If I do this film, then I'll be able to do this other film. Not that. It's like, where am I there, you know? Who am I in this story? You know, I have to say, the films where I wasn't clear on that, you might not see my voice as much. Where that one for me it made sense because it had all the building blocks. It was actually speaking to me where I was at that moment, you know, as a parent. You know, Arrival is one of those films where it's kind of, if I had to describe it, would say it's broken into two parts. There's like the procedural story about a melancholy intellectual, and then there's the other story about a mother and a child. And you cannot approach those two stories the same. You have to, I felt like you and Denis and I felt like you had to really approach those stories with two different strokes, two different pieces of canvas. The way I tried to distinguish the two were for the more procedural part of the story where Louise is trying to crack the code. I used Canon K35 coatings on the lenses so that you got all the beautiful flaring and softness that you would get from a K35, but with stronger mechanics. I thought created a really nice softness, but very sort of sharp in a sense. And then we shot it at 1.9 because the lenses open up to a 1.9. So yes, I did shoot the film wide open, but it just gave it a certain sharpness to it that I felt like the more procedural parts of the film needed for the sort of flashbacks or flash forwards or the sort of breaking of time with Louise and her daughter. And we shot all that stuff, all handheld, on a 35mm at a 1.3. And that's where we really got into the idea of really breaking that line between camera and subject. And, you know, the 35, we tried the 18, we tried the 25. The 35 really worked because it just felt more like portraits. It felt like if you took a frame out of each one of those shots and wanted to create a portrait of the moment, you could do so. The stop really counts, you know. 1.9 is, in this day and age, 1.9 seems slow, but a 1.9 is fast, you know, and we didn't want deep focus. We wanted very shallow focus, which was very important for the story. Yeah, the 20 we loved, but the 20 just felt like it wasn't gonna work out through all of our like spatial requirements, you know. It's just like super beautiful, but when we got too close, I don't want to say it wasn't flattering, it just wasn't our story. The 24 was just on the cusp of being right, but not right. But the 28 really just nailed it. It just kind of had that flatness, the width, this body space consciousness. And then, you know, at a 1.9, it still had a fair amount of distortion. And then, you know, we did the 40. We used the 40 every now and then, just for certain things that we needed to just get in on a little bit. But in general, it's all on the 28. And the 35, I already told you, was you can get slightly closer than the 25, not even slightly, I mean, it's fairly closer than the 25, but you don't have to, you just don't have to be so close. You can back up just a little bit. It makes a difference when you're like 6 inches from somebody on a 35mm, what's happening in the background, you know, or what's happening with the body, you know, to focus on an eye or to focus on a strand of hair. important piece of storytelling in the face and let everything else sort of roll off. You don't lose it. You still know it's there, but it's just that what focus can do, what your first AC, what your focus puller can do with focus to tell the story is really what those things, those moments were about. We didn't use green, we used blue, which helps. But we only had one sequence where we were really locked into blue. We shot the scissor lift in the bottom of the ship surrounding the blue so that we could put the plates of our distant location in the background. But yeah, that was the first time. That was the first time I had worked with a blue screen bigger than an 8x8. You know, it's just like, you know, the scene where she goes on the other side of the screen in that very smoky, sort of odd world where she's in communication with the alien, with the heptapod directly. That was all blue. You know? That shows you how brave and how brilliant Denis is. How much he was very secure about and really committed to the foreground. He was committed to what we were doing and how that was going to anchor the visual effects. So it was on us to determine the tenor of the visual effects. The visual effects wasn't, they're not going to determine how we make the film. We make the film and the visual effects come into play later. Well, they're not come into play later, they're added later. And so what we've done in the foreground has to determine what that looks like. So you'll see, we never threw focus, rarely ever threw focus to a VFX or a CG element. You know, we always kept it in the foreground. And if there had to be 4 or 5 added helicopters, we didn't throw focus there to say, hey, look, it's real helicopters. Because, you know, no, it actually helped that we didn't, because the film is not about that. The film was about what was happening right there in front of us, the immediacy of what's happening in front of us. And visual effects were there to enhance the moment. That was sort of the rule is to not be so precious about a VFX element. You know, there's one shot where she's walking in a field and there's the sort of sun is setting and there's lots of flares, and then there's the ship sort of looming in the background. It's just rough and tumble handheld work. It's no more than just like our character went through an experience, and just to get some fresh air, they left the sort of guts of that tent. And she went out to the field to just try to get a moment to herself, and it just happens to be there in the background. The ship is there. And so, you know, we never racked focus to the ship. I think that's what distinguishes the grammar of the film a lot, is that we're invested in characters. When she's with the heptapods, we try to create that relationship between the two by, again, not questioning the intelligence of the audience. It's just like, they get it. They're in there with us. They're on the journey with us. They don't need us to keep telling them, like, oh, remember, this is a film about aliens, and by the way, okay, now let's go back to our human beings. It's like, no. When it's a shot about a human being, make it about a human being. When it's a shot about an alien, make it about an alien. And to Denis' genius, Joe Walker's genius, it brought some authenticity to it, and a real, like, earthiness, a groundedness, a mundane sort of quality to it that we wanted the film to have.